Ready for some more stories, Miku?
Oh boy, I'm excited. So what's our next set of stories we're reading tonight, my little one?
Well, Miku, I think you might remember him from our last set of stories that we read. So tonight, we'll be reading about James the Red Engine.
James.
Yep, that is definitely right, Miku. Do you remember him from the last story?
Oh, yes, I remember him. He was that new engine that crashed into a field and Thomas rescued him.
Yes, that's quite correct, Miku. You have a very good memory.
You're too kind.
Alright, so our stories in this set are James and the Top Hat, James and the Bootlace, Troublesome Trucks, and James and the Express. Alright, let's get started. To start things off, we have James and the Top Hat. Now, James was a new engine who lived at a station at the other end of the line. He had 2 small wheels in front and 6 driving wheels behind. They weren't as big as Gordon's, and they weren't as small as Thomas's.
You're a special mixed traffic engine.
Sir Topham Hatt told him.
You'll be able to pull coaches or freight cars quite easily.
But freight cars are not easy things to manage, and on his first day, they had pushed him down a hill into a field.
Oh yeah, that was in the last story.
Right again, Miku. You should be on a game show.
Flatterer.
Anyways, James had been ill after the accident, but now he had new brakes and a shining coat of red paint.
Oh, why not blue like Thomas, Edward, Henry, and Gordon?
I was just getting to that, Miku. Now, the reason for that is because...
Your red paint will cheer you up after your accident,
said Sir Topham Hatt kindly.
Oh, now I understand.
I'm glad you do. Now then, let's continue.
You are to pull coaches today, and Edward shall help you.
Now that sounds like a nice change. He needs it to get back into the swing of things.
He does indeed, Miku. Be careful with the coaches, James, said Edward. They don't like being bumped. Freight cars are silly and noisy. They need to be bumped and taught to behave. But coaches get cross and will get you back. They took the coaches to the platform and were both coupled on in front. Sir Topham Hatt, the station master, and some little boys all came to admire James's shining rods and red paint. James was pleased. I'm a really splendid engine, he thought, and suddenly let off steam. Whoosh! Sir Topham Hatt, the station master, and the guard all jumped, and a shower of water fell on Sir Topham Hatt's nice new top hat.
Oops, I don't think he meant for that to happen.
He most certainly did not, my blue-haired angel. Just then, the whistle blew, and James thought they had better go. So they went.
Go on,
He puffed to Edward. Don't push, puffed Edward, for he did not like starting quickly.
Don't go so fast.
Don't go so fast, grumbled the coaches, but James did not listen. He wanted to run away before Sir Topham Hatt could call him back.
Looks like James is in big trouble with the fat director.
Miku, manners.
What? That's who he is, isn't
Looks like the tables have turned on us. Now I'm the one who's judging you.
I know, quite ironic.
You said it, Miku. Now, because James was trying to get away from Sir Topham Hatt, he didn't even want to stop at the first station. Edward tried to stop, but the 2 coaches in front were beyond the platform before they stopped, and they had to go back to let the passengers out. Lots of people came to look at James, and as no one seemed to know about Sir Topham Hatt's top hat, James felt happier. Presently, They came to the junction where Thomas was waiting with his two coaches.
Hello, James, said Thomas kindly. Feeling better? That's good. Ah, that's my guard's whistle. I must go. Sorry I can't stay. I don't know what Sir Topham Hatt would do without me to run this branch line.
And he puffed off importantly with his two coaches into a tunnel.
Well, it seems that Thomas is very proud to have his own branch line.
He definitely is. Now, leaving the junction, they passed the field where James had his accident. The fence was mended, and the cows were back again. James whistled, but they paid no attention. They clattered through Edward's station yard and started to climb the hill beyond.
It's ever so steep, it's ever so steep,
Puffed James.
I've done it before,
Puffed Edward.
It's steep, but we'll do it.
It's steep, but we'll do it.
The two engines puffed together as they pulled the train up the big hill. They both rested at the next station. Edward told James how Gordon had been stuck on the hill, and he had to push him up. James laughed so much that he got the hiccups and surprised an old lady in a black bonnet. She dropped all her parcels, and 3 porters, the station master, and the guard had to run after her, picking them up.
Whoopsie daisy.
James was quiet in the shed that night. He had enjoyed his day, but he was a little afraid of what Sir Topham Hatt would say about the top hat.
Oh dear, I hope he won't be.
Oh, never, never, Miku. He wouldn't do that to his own engines. Unless it was something else that happened. But he's not like that harsh. You gotta understand that.
You're right, Cameron. I guess I was thinking too much.
Now that's much better. Now then, let's get on with the next story. This story is called James and the Bootlace. Now this is one event that James really doesn't like to be reminded of.
How come?
Well, let's read and find out, shall we? Next morning, Sir Topham Hatt spoke severely to James.
If you can't behave, I shall take away your red coat and have you painted blue.
James did not like that at all.
I wouldn't blame him. I would like to have my color of hair changed as a punishment.
I probably would say the same. Anyways, he was very rough with the coaches as he brought them to the platform.
Come along,
He called rudely.
All in good time. All in good time.
The coaches grumbled,
Don't talk, come on.
answered James. And with the coaches squealing and grumbling after him, he snorted into the station.
I don't like where this is going. James is getting too rough with the coaches. And you know what Edward said about how to be careful with them?
Yes, that I indeed do. If he isn't careful, they might get him back. Now James was cross that morning. Sir Topham Hatt had spoken to him, the coaches had dawdled, and worst of all, he had to fetch his own coaches.
Gordon never does,
Thought James.
and he's only painted blue. A splendid red engine like me should never have to fetch his own coaches.
And he puffed and snorted round to the front of the train, and backed up to it with a rude bump.
Ooh,
Groaned the coaches.
that was so bad.
The poor coaches.
To make James even more crosser, he then had to take the coaches to a different platform, where no one came near him as he stood there. Sir Topham Hatt was in his office, the station master was at the other end of the train with the guard, and even the little boy stood a long way off. James felt lonely.
I'll show them,
He said to himself,
they think Gordon is the only engine who can pull coaches.
and as soon as the guard's whistle blew, he started off with a tremendous jerk.
Come on.
He puffed, and the coaches, squealing and groaning in protest, clattered over the switches onto the open line.
Hurry.
Puffed James,
You're going too fast.
You're going too fast.
said the coaches, and indeed they were going so fast that they swayed from side to side. James laughed and tried to go faster, but the coaches wouldn't let him.
Oh, here comes the trouble.
We're going to stop. We're going to stop. We're going to stop.
They said, and James found himself going slower and slower.
What's the matter?
James asked his driver. The brakes are hard on. Leak in the pipe, most likely. You've banged the coaches enough to make a leak in anything.
Well, looks like they're stuck at the moment until they can find a way to fix it.
And they will shortly. The guard and driver got down and looked at the brake pipes all along the train. At last, they found a hole where a rough treatment had made a joint work loose,
How shall we mend it?
said the guard. James's driver thought for a moment. We'll do it with newspapers and a leather bootlace.
Well, where's the bootlace coming from?
Asked the guard.
We haven't got one.
Ask the passengers, said the driver. So the guard made everyone get out.
Has anyone got a leather bootlace?
He asked. They all said no, except one man in a bowler hat, whose name was Jeremiah Joblin, who tried to hide his feet.
You have a leather bootlace there, I see, sir.
Said the guard.
Please give it to me.
I won't, said Jeremiah Joblin.
Then,
Said the guard sternly.
I'm afraid this train will just stay where it is.
Then all the passengers told the guard, the driver, and the fireman what a bad railway it was.
Oh dear.
But the guard climbed into his car, and the driver and fireman made James let off steam. So they all told Jeremiah Joplin he was a bad man instead. At last, he gave them his laces. The driver tied a pad of newspapers tightly around the hole, and James was able to pull the train.
Now that's good. They might be late, but they could make up the time, right?
True, but that's not always the case. Anyways, but he was a sadder and wiser James, and took care never to bump coaches again.
Oh boy, James is in for it now.
You said it. And that will happen in the next story, which is Troublesome Trucks. Now, James did not see Sir Topham Hatt for several days. They left James alone in the shed, and did not even allow him to go out to push coaches and freight cars in the yard.
Oh, poor James. Well, he had been reckless with reconnecting his work, and now he has to learn from his mistakes.
That's very sensible, Miku. I'm quite impressed. Anyways,
Oh dear,
he thought sadly.
I'll never be let out anymore. I shall have to stay in the shed for always, and no one will ever see my red coats again. Oh dear.
James began to cry. Just then, Sir Topham Hatt came along.
I see you are sorry, James.
He said,
I hope now that you will be a better engine. You have given me a lot of trouble. People are laughing at my railway, and I do not like that at all.
I am very sorry, sir.
said James.
I will try hard to behave.
That's a good engine.
Said Sir Topham Hatt kindly.
I want you to pull some freight cars for me. Run along and find them.
And so, James puffed happily away.
Alright, he can pull trains again.
Alright, Miku, settle down a little bit.
Sorry, got too excited again. Hey, can I try to do this part? Please?
Alright, Miku, go for it.
Oh, thank you. Here are your freight cars, James.
Said a little tank engine,
Have you got sober places ready?
and he ran off laughing rudely.
So how was I? Did I do good?
You did wonderful, my Blue-Red Angel.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, my Blue-Red Angel. Now then, let's continue.
Oh!
Said the freight cars as James backed up to them.
We want a proper engine.
Not a red monster.
James took no notice and started as soon as the guard was ready.
Come along.
He puffed,
We won't.
screamed the freight cars, but James didn't care, and he pulled the screeching freight cars sternly out of the yard.
Yeesh, what horrid pieces of rolling stock.
You're telling me? That's what the name suggests. They're troublesome. Now, the freight cars tried hard to make James give up, but he still kept on. Sometimes their brakes would slip on, and sometimes their axles would run hot. Each time they would have to stop and put the trouble right. And each time James would start again, determined not to let the freight cars beat him.
Now that's what I like. A person, or in this case, an engine of determination.
Give up. You can't pull us. You can't.
Called the freight cars.
I can and I will. I can and I will.
Puffed James, and slowly but surely he pulled them along the line. At last they saw Gordon's Hill ahead.
Oh, boy.
Look out for trouble, James, warned his driver. We'll go fast and get them up before they know it. Don't let them stop you. So James went faster, and soon they were halfway up the hill.
I'm doing it.
He panted, but it was hard work.
Will the top never come? He thought.
When with a sudden jerk, it all came easier.
Oh, that's not good.
You're right about that, because...
I've done it.
James puffed triumphantly.
Hurrah!
He thought,
It's easy now.
but his driver shut off steam. They've done it again, he said. We've left our tail behind.
The last 10 freight cars were running backwards down the hill. The coupling had snapped.
Oh no!
But the guard was brave. Very carefully and cleverly, he made them stop.
Phew, looks like he did an amazing job of stopping those stupid freight cars.
Then he got out and walked down the line with his red flag.
So that's why it was easy,
Said James as he backed the other freight cars carefully down.
What silly things freight cars are. There might have been an accident.
Meanwhile, the guard had stopped Edward, who was pulling 3 coaches. Shall I help you, James? Called Edward.
No, thank you.
Answered James.
I'll pull them myself.
Good. Don't let them beat you. So James got ready. Then, with a beep, beep, he was off.
I can do it. I can do it.
He puffed. He pulled and puffed as hard as he could. Beep, 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 beep.
You're doing well.
Whistled Edward as James slowly struggled up the hill, with clouds of smoke and steam pouring from his funnel.
I've done it. I've done it.
He panted and disappeared over the top.
Hooray for James!
They reached their station safely. James was resting in the yard when Edward puffed by with a cheerful peep, peep. Then, walking towards him across the rails, James saw Sir Topham Hatt.
Uh-oh.
Oh dear, what will he say?
He asked himself sadly. But to his surprise, Sir Topham Hatt was smiling.
I was in Edward's train and saw everything.
He said,
You've made the most troublesome freight cars on the line behave. And after that, you deserve to keep your red coach.
Well, that was a nice ending. He got to keep his repeat after all.
Yes, he did, Miku. Now, on to our last story for tonight. This last story is called James and the Express. This is where James gets to...
Let me guess, redeem himself to pulling passenger trains again.
That is right, Miku. Now, let's begin. Now, sometimes Gordon and Henry slept in James's shed, and they would talk of nothing but bootlaces. James would talk about engines who got shut up in tunnels and stuck on hills, but they wouldn't listen and went on talking and laughing.
I said this before and I'll say it again. Jerks.
Anyways,
You talk too much, little James.
Gordon would say,
A fine, strong engine like me has something to talk about. I'm the only engine who could pull the express. When I'm not there, they need 2 engines. Think of that. I've pulled expresses for years, and have never once lost my way. I seem to know the right line by instinct.
said Gordon proudly. But every wise engine knows, of course, that the signalman works the switches to make the engines run on the right lines. But Gordon was so proud that he had forgotten.
Wake up, James.
He said next morning.
It's nearly time for the express. What are you doing? Odd jobs? Ah, well, we all have to begin somewhere, don't we? Roll along now and get my coaches. Don't be late now.
James went to get Gordon's coaches. They were now all shining with lovely new paint. He was careful not to bump them, and they followed him smoothly into the station, singing happily.
We're going away.
We're going away.
I wish I was going with you.
Said James.
I would love to pull the express and go flying along the line.
He left them in the station and went to the back of the yard, just as Gordon, with much noise and blowing of steam, backed up to the train. Sir Topham Hatt was on the train with other important people, and as soon as they heard the guard's whistle, Gordon started.
Look at me now, look at me now.
He puffed, and the coaches glided after him out of the station.
Boop, 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 boop. Goodbye, little James. See you tomorrow.
This must be a non-stop express service that runs to the mainland.
That's exactly what it is. Anyways, James watched the train disappear around a curve, and then went back to work. He pushed some freight cars into their proper sidings and went to fetch the coaches for another train. He brought the coaches to the platform and was just being uncoupled when he heard a mournful, quiet shh, 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 shh. And there was Gordon trying to sidle into the station without being noticed.
Hello, Gordon. Is it tomorrow?
Asked James. Gordon didn't answer. He just let off steam feebly.
Did you lose your way, Gordon?
No, it was lost for me.
He answered crossly.
I was switched off the main line onto the loop. I had to go all round and back again.
Perhaps it was instinct.
said James brightly.
Oof, but that didn't feel good.
Meanwhile, all the passengers hurried to the ticket office.
We want our money back,
They shouted.
Here, we go again.
Everyone was making noise, but Sir Topham Hatt climbed on a trolley and blew the guard's whistle so loudly that they all stopped to look at him. Then he promised them a new train at once.
Gordon can't do it.
He said,
Will you pull it for us, James?
Yes, sir, I'll try.
so James was coupled on, and everyone got in again,
Do your best, James.
said Sir Topham Hatt kindly.
All right, James, show them you can do better.
Just then, the whistle blew, and he had to run to get in.
Come along.
Puffed James,
You're pulling us well. You're pulling us well.
sang the coaches.
Hurry.
Puffed James. Stations and bridges flashed by, and the passengers leaned out of the windows and cheered, and they soon reached the terminus. Everyone said, "Thank you," to James.
Well done,
Said Sir Topham Hatt.
would you like to pull the express sometimes?
Yes, please.
Answered James happily. The next day, when James came by, Gordon was pushing freight cars in the yard.
I like some quiet work for a change.
He said,
I'm teaching these freight cars manners. You did well with the coaches, I hear. Good. We'll show them.
and he gave his freight cars a bump, making them cry. You want to do it with me, Miku?
Oh, absolutely, Cameron.
All right.
Oh.
James and Gordon are now good friends. James sometimes takes the express to give Gordon a rest. Gordon never talks about boot leases, and they are both quite agreed on the subject of freight cars. The end.
Now those were very interesting stories about James. My favorite one would have to be James and the Express.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. And I'm glad that's your favorite. Well, time to hit the sack. Good night, Miku. Sweet dreams.